President Obama met this morning at the White House with the nation's top banking executives, and we are discussing that now with Fred Cannon, who's chief equity strategist at KEEFE, BRUYETTE & Woods, specializes in the financials industry. He's there at his office here in New York City. Fred, thank you for waiting through the commercial break.
Sure.
We were discussing this issue of lending instead being based as it was on the past, which we got in trouble on real estate, and now it needs to sort of shift focus to the consumer. And I want to hit a headline at you. Bank of America says just today it's pledging to boost its small and medium-sized lending to originate at least $5 billion more in loans next year, 2010 versus 2009. Is that more than a dent? Will that make a real difference?
We'll have to see about those numbers. One of the challenges we have is banks are lending. The challenge is that the net amount of loans is going down. So it's not about the new originations, it's about the total balance of loans going up. So that's one of the things we have to kind of look at the numbers that are getting thrown out to make sure that it means that the net is going up, not just the number of new loans being made.
So that $5 billion statistic doesn't really, it's not a good comparison?
I think it's hard to say at this point in time. $5 billion in a $14 trillion economy doesn't sound like it's going to move the needle a lot.
Okay, fair enough. What are some other action items? We hear that buzz phrase a lot. What other things need to be done here to get this evened out between the availability of capital to be lent out, but also these banks that are also under pressure to increase their capital reserves?
Right, and that's a challenge, of course, because the more capital you're required to have, the harder it is to leverage that and lend it out. That said, when we look at the largest banks today, the capital ratios are up. With the exception of Wells Fargo, all the initial recipients of TARP have repaid it and have stronger capital ratios today than they did at the beginning. So we're getting there in terms of the capital position to be really watch these banks help grow the economy as we move forward next year.
All right, you analyze these banks, you look at them closely. Who's in the best position right now?
Well, if we look at it right now, it's the banks who have the capital and have repaid TARP. So as we look at it today, you look at JPMorgan, probably the strongest in the country. Now Bank of America, much stronger position than it was, really just within the last couple of months. We look at U.S. Bancorp. We think that's one of the banks that's in one of the strongest positions with a national footprint, able to get out there with small business and consumer loans.
And then which banks are in the best position to make this lending problem go away?
Well, the real challenge is for the industry. What they have to do is, we spent most part of this decade, the early part until the crisis, making everything secured by real estate. If you remember back 10 or 20 years ago, people didn't get home equity loans to buy a car, to take a vacation. That is gone. And so what we have to do is reconfigure lending so that a vacation is borrowed to take a vacation, not against the value of your house. And so there's a lot of structural changes as well as cyclical issues that we have to deal with in the industry, and that's industry-wide problems. Getting back to the TARP, the president said this morning that the government's gotten back 60% of the money owed with interest. Is that an impressive number? Put that into context for me. Sure, that is an impressive number in terms of the number who've repaid, but really it's been the big repayers who've gotten us there. If we look at right now, we have about 41 banks have repaid out of hundreds of banks who got TARP, and 32 of them have missed their payments of that interest. So we're still a ways away to get all of it back. But I think if you could see a Wells Fargo with $25 billion out, you'll have gotten the big chunks of money back, and then we'll be able to work back through it. And it just shows you that there was a systemic issue in the economy, that TARP, while it wasn't perfect and a lot of us criticized it, went a long ways to help us get back to where we are today, and we avoided the crisis. Moving on to regulation, Valerie Jarrett told our Peter Cook that the bank CEOs told them this morning they do support regulation reform. Do you buy that? Well, the devil's in the details. Certainly they buy regulatory reform the way they see it, and the president and the administration buy regulatory reform they see it. I think the challenge, as was mentioned, is that the lobbyists on the Hill and congressional supporters may not see eye to eye. Fred Cannon, KBW Chief Equity Strategist, a pleasure to have you on. Thanks again for your time. Thank you, Lori.